الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وأزواجه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين أما بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اذكروا الله ذكرا كثيرا وسبحوه بكرة وأصيلا صدق الله العظيم. We were talking about different forms of remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, establishing the dhikr of Allah in our lives. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Quran al-Kareem tells us, فَاذْكُرُونِي أَذْكُرْكُمْ. Remember me, I will remember you. What does it mean when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, if you remember me, I will remember you? Of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not need to remember. He does not forget. So what does remembering you means? As Mufassirin have explained, that when we remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through shukr, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala remembers us through His in'amat, through His gifts. Means, when a person gets into the habit of remembering Allah in the form of shukr, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keeps on giving this person more and more of His blessings. When you remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the istighfar, seeking Allah's forgiveness, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala remembers us through His maghfirah, which means He keeps on giving us His maghfirah. When we remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bithana, through glorifying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala remembers us, means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us more and more barakah and khair in everything that we have. So in whichever form we remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in return we get more blessings from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is what remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala means. اذكروني بالدعاء, remember me through the dua. And I will remember you means I will accept your dua. I will fulfill your needs. So in the time of your needs, I will remember you means I will fulfill your needs. فَاذْكُرُونِي أَذْكُرْكُمْ. Remember me, I will remember you. And as the hadith have explained, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, hadith Qudusi, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَإِن ذَكَرَنِي فِي مَلَئٍ ذَكَرْتُهُ فِي مَلَئٍ خَيْرٍ مِّنْهُ. When a person mentions my name and he remembers me in his gathering, I remember him means I mention him in a gathering better than his gathering in the gathering of malaika. Look at the rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that we remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a gathering of people like us, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will mention our name in the gathering of malaika. Subhanallah. Our name would be mentioned over there. Our name will be mentioned by Rabbul Alameen subhanahu wa ta'ala, and He would talk to malaika, He would talk to angels by mentioning this name, that this person of mine is remembering me and I will fulfill his need, or I will do this for him. When we look at our souls, really there is no way that my name should ever be mentioned up there. It will spoil everything. This is a dirty name. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, subhanallah, out of His rahmah, He made it such that our name can be mentioned in the gathering of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and it can be mentioned by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the gathering of malaika. As Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says in the hadith, that when a person sends blessings on Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, durood to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Angels would take this in the form of a gift to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and they tell Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, Ya Rasulullah, this has been sent to you by such and such person by mentioning our name. We say, Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. Angels would take it and present this to Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, that this has been sent to you by this person from that part of the world. Our name would be mentioned in the gathering of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And the ayah of Quran is telling us, فَاذْكُرُونِي أَذْكُرْكُمْ. You remember me, I will remember you, I will mention your name, as the hadith are explaining, فِي مَلَئٍ خَيْرٍ مِّنْ. In a gathering that is better than your gathering, in the gathering of malaikah. This is why Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam says that keep in the habit of always making dua and remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because when the person gets in a difficult situation, and he prays to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, malaikah say to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ya Allah, this is a very familiar voice. As Mufassirin have narrated in the story of Sayyidina Yunus alayhi salatu wassalam, he was in the stomach of the well. And at that time, he is in the stomach of a well. He is making dua and he is glorifying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from there. La ilaha illa anta subhanak, inni kuntu min al-zalimin. At a time of hardship and a difficulty. What is it that we normally say? What comes out of our mouth at the time of hardships and difficulties? It's because of those people. It's because of this person. It's because of you. How many times, and really this is a fact of our life, if we try to understand ourselves and see what we do, how we react to difficulties and hardships, we try to keep on blaming people. Husband and wife are blaming each other. This happened because of you. No, it happened because of you. Car accident, God forbid. And everyone will blame it on each other. For hours, people won't remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how it happened. Why did you do this? Why did you give me the phone? Why did you make me talk? Why did you make me do this work? And it happened because of this. If we didn't come out today, I had to come out because of you. If I didn't come out today, I would not be in this situation. This is all that we talk about at the time of difficulties. And here Yunus alayhi salatu wassalam is praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that situation. He is being swallowed by a well. La ilaha illa anta subhanak. He knows this well is nothing. It's not, let me try to see how I can direct the well. How can I do something that I kill this well? He knows this has been ordered by Allah. Everything that happens in the world is by Allah's order. Nothing happens without Allah's order. Nothing happens without Allah's permission. Rather than blaming anyone, rather than cursing at anyone, rather than trying to deal with this well and trying to fix my situation on my own, let me pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. La ilaha illa anta subhanak, inni kuntu min al-zalimin. Mufassirin have narrated, when Sayyidina Yunus alayhi salatu wassalam started praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and making this dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right away the malaikah started interceding on his behalf to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Malaikah around the arsh of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they started saying, Ya Allah, this is a very familiar voice. We always used to hear this voice. It looks like, and at this time, the way we hear it, we can see that this person is in difficulty. Ya Allah, this is a familiar voice, and this person seems to be in difficulty. He always used to praise you. He always used to remember you. He always used to do your dhikr, Ya Allah. At this time, we intercede on his behalf. Ya Allah, please accept his prayer and get him out of the difficulty and hardship. Malaika were interceding on his behalf because the familiar voice. This Yunus alayhi salam, of course, for sure, he's a prophet of Allah. He wasn't just praying at the time of hardship and difficulty. He was always praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So our voice becomes familiar to the malaika, to these angels. In fact, there are hadiths, and this will just change the topic, lead us to totally another topic, but I will just mention one hadith about it. That through the ibadah, a person becomes familiar to the malaika. Malaika recognize the person once a person is used to doing the ibadah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam tells us in a hadith that at the time of the death, if this person was used to performing salah with the jama'ah, some of the angels, they go to this person at the time of death just to help him against the whisperings of shaitan. And that is the time when the person needs help the most difficult time of our life, at the time of death. Shaitan comes with all kind of whispering at that time. He tries his best at that time, because this is now everything for him. If he can get something out of the person at this time, he got everything. Because if this person, God forbid, would obey shaitan at the time of his death, this person would lose everything. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, shaitan tries different ways. Shaitan tries many different ways to mislead this person at the time of death and prevent him from reciting the kalimah. There are so many hadiths that talk about it, that shaitan comes in the form of his parents or elders, especially those who may be on a wrong direction, maybe involved in disobedience in this life. Shaitan comes in the form of those people, and he says that, look, I am your dad, I am your mom, I am your uncle, I am this. Whoever the person may be that he knew in this life and had died before him, and says to him, look, at the time of my death, I turned away from Islam, and that was the only thing that saved me after death. And this is your last chance. If you die as a Muslim, you will be punished forever. So this is your chance. If you turn away from Islam, you will be saved from all the punishments and the hardships of the hereafter, just the way I'm saved. He comes in the form of those people. And this is how he tries to convince this person to reject Islam wal-iyāzu billah at the time of death. Just imagine if this person would obey shaitan at that time. Wal-iyāzu billah. He lost everything. But of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not leave us in darkness and helpless totally. He provided malaika to help us, but that's only if we allow the malaika to come to us. If we don't allow these malaika to come to us, to talk to us, then these malaika can't do anything. They cannot, because we are not allowing them to come and talk to us. If a person is doing the things because of which the malaika of rahmah cannot come closer to the person. This person is dying in the club. There are pictures all around the house. Malaika of rahmah will not enter the house. There are things that bring the wrath of Allah, bring the la'na of Allah, the curse of Allah. And malaika of angel, they do not like those type of things. They stay away from these places. So they would not come to the person. How many people, they die at their home and they're surrounded by these type of things that are preventing from malaikatul rahmah from coming to their home. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam tells us, at that time, at the time of that difficulty, and imagine when the person is going through that pain and it's the worst pain of the life. Regardless of how much pain the person have gone through in his or her life, no one can have any pain worse than the pain of death. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam says, if that person, the person who's dying, if he would have any strength at that time and he has the power of taking up the sword, he will start killing everyone right and left out of pain that he's going through. The ruh, the soul is just leaving from the whole body, is getting pulled out of our body. From each and every portion, each and every hair of the body, the ruh is getting pulled out. So at the time of that pain, this person would like to get out of it, out of the situation. He's going through a lot of pain. And we know when we are in pain, the first thing that happens is the person would like to do anything that will give him any relief from this pain. Someone says, eat this haram thing. Okay, if I can get rid of this pain because through this, I'll take it. A person is going through difficulties at his home, with his wife, with his children, or with her husband. And someone says to do something, someone asks us to do something that is shirk, that is kufr, that is anything, and the person is willing to do it. Just to get out of this situation. It's too difficult, I can't handle it anymore. The pain of death is the worst pain. So at that time, the person would really need, number one, we need to get ourselves used to tolerating these things and in no situation giving up the remembrance of Allah and the ibadah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So then at the time of death, the person is used to remembering Allah even at the time of hardships and difficulties. Number two, when the person is used to the ibadah, this is what the hadith I was narrating, that when the person is used to the ibadah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he gets the help at the time of death by the malaikah, by the angels. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, at that time the malaikah, the angel would come and see if this person was used to coming to the jama'ah. There are malaikah, they come at the time of every salah, they come and check people in the jama'ah, who are the people in the masjid. And if this person was regular to the jama'ah, to the masajid, this angel will come and help the person against shaitan, against the whispers of shaitan. Will not allow shaitan to whisper to this person that no, stay away from him. He was a person who was regular to the jama'at. See the benefit of the ibadah, that you get the help of the malaikah at the time when the person needs it. And not only in normal situation when we needs it the most. Yunus alayhi salatu wassalam is in that difficult situation. He's praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and malaikah are interceding on his behalf. Ya Allah, very similar, very familiar voice. Ya Allah, accept his prayer. Ya Allah, we always used to hear it. And at this time he's in difficulty, so please, Ya Allah, answer his prayer at the time of difficulty. This is when our voice becomes familiar to the malaikah. So we need to establish these type of things in our lives. The remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has to be established. The dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has to be established in our life. So even at the time of death, at the time of difficulties, the person would remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like Yunus alayhi salatu wasalam, at the time of difficulty, instead of just uttering words here and there, curse words and different type of words and blaming and thinking why did it happen and how did it happen and what could I have done in order to avoid this. No, nothing can happen. It's all in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he knew, of course, he realized, he's a prophet of Allah, that everything is in Allah's control. This well is in Allah's control. And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will accept my prayer and will change my situation, I will be out of this difficulty. So at that time he prays and he starts making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. La ilaha illa anta subhanak inni kuntu min al-zalimin. So, فَاذْكُرُونِي أَذْكُرْكُمْ. Remember me, I will remember you. Remember me in all of your situations. Remember me at all situations. Then I will remember you in all of your situations too. But when you remember me only at the time of hardship, then you will have to wait. When you remember me only at the time when you are going through pain, and at good times you are too busy with your work, at the time of wedding, we don't have time to remember Allah wal-a'yazu billah, and all kind of sins, all kind of muharramat, all kind of things that are totally against the deen of Allah, because it's an happy occasion. And so many people, I myself have experienced people saying, oh, you get it only once in a lifetime. And it so happened that this person may have it many more times in his lifetime, because I know his wife doesn't want to stay with him anymore. It happened. I have seen it myself. I know the person. I told him, haram, don't do it. He says, once in a lifetime. And now this is his second chance again. Within a few years. We do things by disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is no rahmah in it. There is no barakah in it. And when there is no barakah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if the blessing of Allah is not there, then let the rest of the world try to bless it. There will be no blessing in it. فَاذْكُرُونِي أَذْكُرْكُمْ. This is what I was mentioning. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, remember me, I will remember you. We need to develop the habit of remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala all the times. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in another ayah of Quran al-Kareem, وَلَذِكْرُ اللَّهِ أَكْبَرُ. The remembrance of Allah is the greatest. Imagine, when we are looking for something very great, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, out of things that you can do, وَلَذِكْرُ اللَّهِ أَكْبَرُ. Can now, after seeing this ayah, can someone try to tell us something that is greater than remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? What could be greater than remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, greater than the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? When Allah Himself tells us, dhikrullah akbar. Just as we always say, we say Allahu Akbar. Allah is the greatest. Allah is the greatest the same way Allah's name is the greatest name in the world. Just Allah is the greatest, His name is the greatest name. For me and you, we cannot do anything that is greater than remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَلَا ذِكْرُ اللَّهِ أَكْبَرُ. Name anything in this world. Try to find anything in this world that a person can do to earn reward, and this ayah will tell us, but still, وَلَا ذِكْرُ اللَّهِ أَكْبَرُ. Remembrance of Allah is the greatest. That is the greatest thing. You can't bring anything that is greater than remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is why Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says in a hadith, مَا مِنْ عَمَلٍ. There is no action a human being can do أَنْجَى لَهُ مِنْ عَذَابِ اللَّهِ مِنْ ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. No action, nothing a person can do in this life that can provide better protection against the adhab of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, better than dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is nothing better than the remembrance of Allah, better than the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that could provide protection against the adhab of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the best protection. If a person knows that, God forbid, he may run into a situation where there will be a fire there. I have to go through this fire to save my children, to save my belongings, to save my property. I will have to walk through this fire. He will get anything he can on his body, on his clothing, the type of dress, the type of clothing that will protect him against that fire. And we all know our situation. Who needs more protection against the adhab of akhirah than ourselves because of all of our deeds that we have committed? And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, no one can do anything in this life that would provide a better protection against the adhab of Allah better than dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is the best protection against it. So someone asked Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, وَلَا الْجِهَادُ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ Ya Rasulullah, when you are saying there is nothing that would provide better protection against the adhab of Allah, better than the dhikr of Allah, so not even jihad? Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, no, not even that. Because we see in Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He orders people to do jihad, even at that time He orders them to do the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at that time. In another hadith, a sahabi asked Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said, Ya Rasulullah, this hadith is narrated by Mu'az ibn Jabal radiyallahu anhu. A person asked, Ya Rasulullah, Ayyul jihadi a'zam? Which jihad will get us the highest reward? Which will be the most rewarding jihad? Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, أكثرهم لله تبارك وتعالى ذكرا, in which you do the most dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he asked, Ya Rasulullah, أي الصائمين أعظم أجرا? Out of the people who are fasting, who gets the highest reward through the fast? Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said the same thing, أكثرهم لله تبارك وتعالى ذكرا. The person who remembers Allah the most in his fast, who would do the most dhikr in his fast. So the person then asked about salah, about zakah, about hajj, about sadaqah. And at each of these questions, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam's response was the same, that this ibadah will be the highest rewarding ibadah for the one who would do the dhikr of Allah at the time of doing this ibadah. A person who would do the dhikr of Allah the most at the time of doing this ibadah, that person is the one who is obtaining the highest reward. When Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said this, Sayyidina Abu Bakr and Umar radiyallahu anhuma were sitting in the same gathering. So Abu Bakr says to Umar radiyallahu anhu, Ya Aba Hafs, ذهب الذاكرون بكل خير. These people of dhikr, the people who keep on doing the dhikr, they have got all the khair, they got all the blessings. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, when he heard it, he said, Ajal, yes, why not? That's true. That a person who is busy, involved in the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for sure, he's getting all the khair and he's getting all the blessings. There is another hadith narrated by Sayyidina Abu Musa al-Ash'ari radiyallahu anhu. He says, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, if there is a person whose pocket is full of money and he keeps on giving it out, continuously he's giving his money out as sadaqah, وَآخَرُ يَذْكُرُ اللَّهِ, there is another person who is sitting and doing the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, كَانَ ذِكْرُ اللَّهِ أَفْضَلِ, the person who's doing the dhikr will be getting higher reward than this person who's giving out his money as a sadaqah and is continuously giving sadaqah. And we can really understand this hadith only if we know the reward of the sadaqah. How much reward there is in sadaqah. And with all of that reward of sadaqah, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, still the person who's sitting and doing the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is getting higher reward than the one who's continuously giving out his money as sadaqah. This does not mean that now, for those who are able to give sadaqat, will say, let me earn the higher reward and that this money I'll use it for myself and I'll just sit in the crib and doing the dhikr of Allah. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is comparing the situation of two people. One of them is rich people, is wealthy people. His responsibility, he has to give out sadaqah. That's his responsibility. The other person does not have anything. He cannot give out those sadaqat. He looks at that person and he feels, look, I lost all benefit of all of this reward. I'm not getting the reward the way this person is getting. He just sits and keep on doing the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam telling us that this person who does not have money still has a way of earning more reward than those people who are giving out all of those sadaqat. If this person will use and make good use of his time by doing the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In another hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was asked by a sahabi called Abdullah ibn Busr radiyallahu anhu. Abdullah ibn Busr radiyallahu anhu says that a person asked Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Ya Rasulullah, inna shara'i al-Islam qad kathurat alayya, فأخبرني بشيء أتشبث به. Ya Rasulullah, there are so many different things in Islam that we have learned. There were virtues of so many different things. Ya Rasulullah, now I don't know which one to do. I can't do all of them. So I will be doing some out of these. Ya Rasulullah, just tell me some of the one of these things that I can hold strongly to it. And I can keep on doing it at all times. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, لا يزال لسانك رطبا من ذكر الله. Your tongue should always be busy in the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Out of all the a'mal of fada'il, all the things that will give you the virtue and will get you the closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the best Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is advising the Sahabi is that if you want to hold to one of them, then keep on doing the dhikr of Allah. Keep your tongue always busy in the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In other hadith, Mu'az ibn Jabal radiyallahu anhu says, قال آخر كلمة فارقت عليها رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. The last word I heard from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was that I asked, Ya Rasulullah, أخبرني بأحب الأعمال إلى الله. Ya Rasulullah, tell me which of our actions are dearest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Something that is ahabbul a'mal, something that is loved by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, أَن تَمُوتَ وَلِسَانُكَ رَطْبٌ مِّن ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. You do so much dhikr of Allah, you remember Allah so much that at the time of death, your tongue is still busy in the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the action that Allah loves the most. And of course, this thing can happen only if a person in normal situation is doing the dhikr of Allah, remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then at the time of death, the person would be remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Otherwise, as scholars have mentioned so many stories in their books, in the books of tafasir, the books of history, that people at the time of death, someone is just saying everything for $5, everything for $5. A person at the time of his death, he's calling this $5, $5, $5. And that is because this is the trade that he was involved in. And now at the time of death, this is all he remembers. So a person at the time of death, of course, will remember only the thing that he is used to. At the time of difficulty, when someone is pain, someone is in difficulty. At the time of pain, at the time when a person was hit, what normally we would say, what comes out of our mouth at that time, what people would hear from us. Someone will shout, "Ah, children over here, ouch." And if a person is used to the dhikr of Allah, you would hear Allah, Subhanallah, La ilaha illallah. This is for a person who's used to these type of things. This is what you would hear from those people. This is the benefit. It will continue until we die if we get ourselves used to remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq to always remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Keep our tongue busy in the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In many hadiths, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam used the word that لا يزال لسانك رطب من ذكر الله. Keep your tongue always busy with the dhikr of Allah. Keep it wet. Rat means wet. As our tongue stays wet with the saliva, keep it wet with the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That always the dhikr of Allah is on your tongue. In one of the hadiths, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam used the word تَحَرَّكَتْ بِي شَفَتَاهُ. That I keep on remembering my servant and keep on blessing him as long as his lips are moving with my remembrance. So our tongue, our lips should always be busy in the dhikr and in the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the habit that we need to develop. Inshallah, once we develop this habit, inshallah, at the time of death, we will be doing the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we will leave this world while doing the dhikr of Allah and remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam tells us in the hadith that people will be resurrected on the day of Qiyamah in the same form as they died, in the form that they have died. So if they died while doing the dhikr of Allah, inshallah they will be raised in that form, and they will be known through that these are the people of Iman. These are the people of Ikhlas. May Allah give us tawfiq to always be busy in the dhikr of Allah and remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in all situations, no matter what we are doing. We are working, driving, whatever. Always the dhikr of Allah, the remembrance of Allah has to be on our tongues, on our lips, and in our minds. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين والمسلمات وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين.